I read something earlier. We've talked about problems in the Bible and contradictions and issues that people have. You can go to skepticsannotatedbible.com and other stuff, and you see plenty of lists all over the internet, and some of them are good lists where they point out legitimate problems, and some of them are not particularly good, and people make mistakes because they don't really bother to read. And somebody had asked this week whether or not atheists or biblical critics, in pulling out these criticisms, were actually quote mining. Right. And the answer is no. While that may happen on occasion, I'd say that you could much more strongly make the case that it is theists, Christians in particular, who are doing the quote mining. Because you find something that seems objectionable or seems problematic in the Bible, and they'll say, well, you're taking it out of context. And then if you open it and read the whole thing, and you've got everything there. Oh, no. There's this other passage in this other book written by somebody else 200 years after that provides the context you need in order to understand this. That's much closer to the spirit of quote mining than anything else. In John Loftus' book, and I'm going to run through this real quick. This is kind of confusing because this is me reading John Loftus quoting somebody else referencing an apologist's material. Dr. Valerie Tarico reveals just how Christians argue with regard to biblical inconsistencies. She writes, "A whole industry has sprung up to convince believers and non-believers alike that these difficulties are inconsequential." She quotes from Gleason Archer's Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties, where he tells his readers that when looking at the Bible, one must first assume God inspired the authors and preserved them from error or mistake. Then she writes, Archer says, essentially, that the reader must start the process of inquiry by assuming a certain outcome. Don't look for the most likely hypothesis suggested by the evidence, nor the one that is most likely straightforward or reasonable. Start by believing that a certain conclusion is true. Examine the evidence through the lens of that conclusion. Ask yourself, what explanations or interpretations can I come up with that would allow me to maintain my belief that these texts are not contradictory? If you can find any at all, then you have succeeded in your task. By implication, if you cannot, then the problem lies with you and not with the text.
Of course.
And that is the perfect summary of what goes on amongst apologists trying to reconcile biblical difficulties.